Hello. I will talk about a few issues concerning the French lieutenant's woman in this discussion. This will be more or less a general discussion rather than something very specific. So I will ask you to bear with me for the next half hour or so. Now, the point from which one may begin is this postmodern concern with freedom instead of the pre-postmodern concept of the authorial omnipotence. What we have is the postmodern authorial omnipresence, which does not make the author all-powerful, but gives the author and the reader simultaneously this presence in the text which allows a new kind of dialogue between the author and the reader. Because here the author God is not telling you how things should be, must be, how things are, but rather here the author is almost taking the reader into confidence and almost discussing the narrative, the possibilities, and just short of justifying the authorial self, the author keeps on giving multiple possibilities to the reader, and the reader has the freedom to choose. Of course, the French lieutenant's woman is special because it gives multiple endings, multiple possibilities, 3 specific endings to be precise in this case. But even in many other texts where there are a variety of experiments with the narrative, with the flow of storytelling, with the kind of storytelling that we have. In fact, I think I would mention novels like Mantissa here, if we have to stick to Fowles, or even if you go to somebody like a novel like The Unbearable Likeness of Being, and so on and so forth. And I am not even going to get into magic realism proper as such. But the idea that the entire author-God concept is not functioning anymore is very, very applicable to a self-conscious work like the French lieutenant's woman. Now, my interest with the French lieutenant's woman began when I was thinking of doing my PhD, my doctoral work, and it was Pinter's adaptation which kind of caught me, as they say, hook, line and everything. So going back in time, reading the text, rereading the text, you come across so many possibilities, so many interpretations perhaps, so many kinds of reading that it somehow disturbs the traditional reader. The traditional reader is comfortable with the author hand-holding the reader throughout the text. In fact, the traditional reader is often quite comfortable when the author tells the reader that this is the myth that I am creating, this is the construction, this is the meaning that I am trying to give you. But someone like Fowles will most definitely disturb a reader like that. In fact, Fowles had somewhere said that he is like the producer, director, etc. He is the constructor, and in fact, in cinematic terms, he is the one who is, he's a cinematographer. He has the camera, he has the angles. But what he does not do is tell his characters what to do. He gives his characters freedom. He allows his characters to grow on their own, function on their own. I mean, we know that is deep down, if you are psychoanalyzing the whole thing, then it is Fowles who is looking in different directions. But as far as the traditional author-reader relationship is concerned, here we have a number of authors, in fact, who are changing all that, who are looking at everything from a significantly different perspective, who are not, as I said in the beginning, trying to be omnipotent. Omniscience is a different thing. They're there inside the text, inside the narrative, they're intruding into the narrative. Anyone who has read The French Lieutenant's Woman knows how many times Fowles is intruding. Fowles is there, Fowles is talking to you as not perhaps the author with grand authority, but a kind of a secret share, someone who is taking you into confidence, asking you about the possibilities. So that is one of the things that makes The French Lieutenant's Woman so very interesting. And now see, all the digressions, all the intrusions, as I have said, all the sudden bits of information that are provided, that often proves to be somewhat jarring, and that makes you a little uncomfortable. Perhaps there are some ironical elements attached which will make you think, and the author will tell you that this is something that is possible, this is something that may happen if something had happened like that. So all those intrusions, it depends on the reader to accept it or not. If the reader accepts it, then the reader can be comfortable with all the possibilities. But then again, this being truly postmodern, the reader has the freedom to choose one ending as well. And very cleverly, Fowles designs the ending to choose three kinds of readers. Now, there is no question of judgment here. If the reader in their reading had found one particular ending more supportable or more satisfying, then that is quite fine. It does not matter. The reader does not have to do anything as such. There is no compulsion. The reader will read, but the author will give the reader all the scope that the author earlier had. So this kind of handing over the power, this is something that you can realize when you are going through a text like The French Lieutenant's Woman, much more than many other texts that I have gone through. So the comments, etc. In fact, as Fowles himself says, that he does not dominate his characters. His characters are, to quote a lot of critics over a lot of centuries, in fact, his characters are not puppets. Right? Puppets in the sense that his characters, the actions, the flow, the development, that happens organically, that happens in a multitude of ways, And Fowles feels free to explore all the different manners in which that development may have happened. And it is liberating for the author as well. It's not only the death of the author, it's not only the reign of the reader, it's a kind of an authorial liberation as well, because the author now has more, ironically, almost paradoxically, more power by giving up the traditional power that authors thought they had. So all that, in fact, as I was going to say, that the element when particularly, repeatedly when Charles is finding Sarah, the dairy episode, and Fowles is saying that Charles could have walked away, Charles could have come back, Charles could have talked to her, Charles could have done so many things, but apparently it was Charles's choice. It's as if Charles was telling Fowles that this is what I want to do. So this kind of engagement, which is dissociative, this is something that is very new. This is something that is very, very postmodern. And this is something, well, I'll keep on using this word, excuse me for using a very non-theoretical, non-academic word. This is very special. And again, this puppet idea, if we come back to it, I mean, if you think about Shaw and his theatre, then it's all about the characters becoming the mouthpieces. We are no longer in the Shavian domain. We are no longer in that very authoritative, dictatorial kind of a space where the author or the playwright will sit over everything, brooding like, the presences in Milton, and control everything and give birth to everything. It's not like that. It's no longer like that. It's much more in the domain of 6 characters in search of an author, where the characters have these privileges, these freedoms, the freedom to grow organically, the freedom to grow in the direction their individual psychologies are taking them, not in a predetermined thematic way, as we expect them to, as traditionally we have been expecting them. They would just grow as the plot demands. It's no longer like that. The plot will change to accommodate their growth. If there are multiple possibilities, then the plot will have multiple endings, as in the case of the FrenchLieutenant's woman. And the Victorian idea is especially brought in because during the Victorian period we see this flowering of the authority idea more than ever. It was always there, it was always very strong, and these authority figures, custodians of meaning, people who would tell you what to think, how to think, not open criticism or open interpretation like we may want to do, but all these dictated arrivals at meaning, that was very much there in the Victorian period. Somebody like Hardy, when Hardy is talking about the immanent will, it's all prefixed, it's all, you don't really have any freedom, any independence to go about your life in any kind of specific way. So that is very special. And the endings, if you look at that, the 3 endings, one in which Charles is marrying Ernestina, and the author intrudes, tells you that they are not going to have that happily ever after thing. They are not going to have that. Then, but that kind of an ending would satisfy the Victorian mindscape. They would be happy that yes, Charles did the right thing. He did not fall for the fallen kind of a person. He stuck to his word, his honor, his station in society, and he marries Ernestina. So it's all good, it's all brilliant. There is nothing to complain about. We can all go home happy, never bothering to think whether Charles and Ernestina would be happy. Because like all the times, I guess, many Victorian marriages were not really happy. And if you think about those happy ending Victorian novels, the question that comes later on, Shaw would be doing something like that in Pygmalion, a little bit of a comment that things will not be all hunky-dory later on. So that is there. And the second one in which Charles and Sarah have a happy ending, that would satisfy another set of readers who would think, yes, Ernestina is no longer in the picture. Charles has invested a lot of his life in his quest for Sarah, so they should have a happy ending. They deserve union, so to say. They deserve to be brought together, they should live together, get married or something like that. That is one set of thought. The last set of thought, where they do not find that they can be with each other anymore, that would satisfy another set of readers. That set of readers would think that, all right, this is not a good couple. Because in Lyme Regis, they had a different kind of a power equation. But now that Sarah has found liberation, fulfillment, location, herself, the equation is completely different. Charles is no longer the quote-unquote young god who was a kind of a promise for Sarah for a better life. But then again, I am starting to sound as if Sarah was manipulative or something like that. It's not like that. No judgments, please. So at that particular ending, Sarah is a very different woman. Charles is also a very different man. He is no longer the man in control. He is a man who has lost a lot. And curiously enough, he is a man who finds meaning only in his quest. When they're together, the new Sarah might not be able to, give Charles what Charles is looking for. And Charles most definitely will not be able to give Sarah what she is looking for. They can come together out of compassion, out of consideration that Charles has spent so much, he has done so much for her, so she might want to accept his hand, etc., so on and so forth. But will that end well? Somehow, in fact, there is this statement, this feeling that Charles and Sarah's marriage would be even unhappier than Charles and Ernestina's marriage, because they are two very different people now. And the question of what kind of a connection they had to begin with, that is also a very significant question. So the author here finds it better not to engage in one particular ending, but to allow the readers to have all the options, and the readers may choose to invest the kind of meaning they would like to. They could create their own mythologies out of this particular text. So that and see, the author is under a lot of pressure to create a kind of thematic narrative, not only because of creative impulses but also because of socio-cultural political pressures, influences, demands. In fact, we have had histories, in the history of literature we have had so many authors who had had to succumb to external pressure, who had had to change the ending. And there may be populist endings, there may be different kinds of crowd-pleasing endings, because not a lot of authors, more significantly, not a lot of publishers would want something that is very shocking, because certain times demand certain kinds of things. For instance, if you were in the mid-war period between the First World War and the Second World War, drawing room drama was the flavor of the day. So even texts, even Hollywood was churning out films which were crowd-pleasing, which were full of, which had happy endings, which were inspirational. A text as classic as Pride and Prejudice would have a very, very strange kind of a resolution in the hands of mid-war Hollywood. So anyway, those demands are certain things, but the postmodern author is kind of navigating that space, kind of saving the authorial self by introducing as many possibilities as are possible, so as to give the reader all the liberty, and in return, as I have said, gain some power over the lives, not of the characters, not of the readers, but the postmodern aesthetic life. Now, this marriage bit, marriage is a socio-political, cultural construct. So if Sarah had married Charles, that would have created an issue, because that would be Sarah surrendering to societal demands, conforming. And that is one thing that we do not expect Sarah to be. She doesn't want to conform. If she could conform, the story would be completely different. She has adopted this badge of dishonor. She has created an identity in which she presents herself as the fallen person. Well, fallen absolutely in Victorian terms. No judgment, no comment from the postmodern or even modern points of view. So this pressure, whether Sarah would succumb to this pressure or not is a question. For Charles, marriage is the only rational, reasonable ending. Because why has he been looking for Sarah? Why has he been pursuing Sarah, if not to marry her? Because that is the, as I said, rational conclusion to his quest. So for him, marriage is the ultimate goal. With Ernestina, it was that. But now that Ernestina is gone and he has left everything for her, he is not simply looking for a kind of a platonic friendship. He is looking for a life with this woman, the woman whom he doesn't really fully understand. So that is a problem. What Charles has, to begin with, its fascination, and to end with, its obsession. And the question of love, the question of compromise, the question of adjustment they do not really occur to Charles for multiple reasons. He is a man, so out of this patriarchal conditioning, he is probably not familiar with these concepts. As a woman, Sarah is expected to, and you know all that. So I'm not going to talk about that in any detail as such, but that is Charles's ending. So out of these three endings, two would be good endings for Charles, because Charles could attain marriage with Ernestina or with Sarah. But out of the two last endings, if he had married Ernestina, it would not really be a problem, because Sarah would be what Sarah was. But now that Sarah leaves out of that sequence of events, Sarah can leave. Sarah finds a kind of approval, probably a kind of acceptance, and she can construct herself, perhaps even reconstruct herself. So she leaves. She finds meaning in herself, something that alone she could not so far. And she can look for a new kind of an identity which will probably include her earlier stature. She is not running away from who she was. She is just running away from this very small-minded small town full of fossils and just going to another dimension where experiments with vision, where experiments with the horizon, where experiments with time limitations, everything is happening. And as I keep telling everybody, the pre-Raphaelite kind of an idea is probably the one bright spot which is standing out, excepting Browning of course, which is quite deliberately and defiantly different within the Victorian space. So that particular station is accepted. Now for Charles, and even if you think about the afterwards, then Charles and Sarah, Charles's obsession, Sarah's consideration, that would not create a good partnership. But if Sarah rejects Charles, so you can probably understand which ending I am rooting for, although I will never really impose my ideas on you, but this is the one that speaks to me, and please don't be judgmental. And see, and when they come together, if Sarah rejects him, then he will be free of his obsession, and she will be in her new identity as she was. So that is the happiest one for her probably, considering the continuity of the narrative, the continuity which we are not privy to. So we will have that. And Charles, as I said, would be liberated from his obsession. He might become a tragic hero, he might become this pathetic figure or whatever, but there would be release for him. Them being together would create another kind of conflict, let me say. See, what happens is, as the narrative progresses, as the narrative begins, in fact, to begin with, we have Sarah, who is an outcast, who has voluntarily become an outcast, who has voluntarily created this narrative that she was compromised, where she was not. That is one of the major surprises that we come across in the text, that she was not actually compromised. She was quote unquote virtuous, but her lack of virtue, which turned her into an outcast, that gave her the identity that she so desperately required, because she was not happy with the standard patterns of identity given to women of her stature, of her station. So she wanted something else. And so when we are beginning the novel, she is already an outcast. And Charles is fascinated with this outcast identity. And as the novel progresses, Charles is getting more and more entangled, perhaps, to it's not an comfortable word. I'm actually uncomfortable using it. So, and the one person who has some inkling about all this is Dr. Grogan. But Dr. Grogan does not really know that she has not really been compromised. He does not know exactly how far the game is, how the game is completely played on Sarah's terms. So she has all the power here, and Charles is engaging into it. And as the narrative progresses, Sarah leaves the space, finds her identity, but Charles manages to become an outcast. And it is also a matter of choice. When Charles is going back on his vows, breaking his engagement to Ernestina, he knows that this will be ruinous for him. He will be ruined as he is. And this is making him an outcast. But this location of being an outcast is not giving him an identity, only an obsession. Only this desperate need to find Sarah, because Sarah becomes his space, time, his obsession, which is rather alarming in a way, because it may not be completely healthy. And he holds himself responsible for putting her in a position which he had thought she was already in. And as far as he is concerned, he is conflicted. On the one hand, he is fascinated. On the other hand, he is a typical Victorian gentleman. Then again, there is this scientific angle to his makeup. So, if you ask me, although we are in a postmodern space, a novel about the Victorians, Fowles manages to present the Victorian dilemma rather brilliantly here. Because Charles is, has this desire for her, but on the other hand, he has this desire to be accepted, to be normal, quote unquote, to follow all the norms, to live a life which would keep him in his station. But the other desire wins that conflict, and Dr. Grogan can't really help him, because Dr. Grogan once again is not a part of the bigger secret which Sarah only knows, which Charles will know at one point of time. So this outcast nature, it's not like Sarah is trying to entrap Charles, not at all. But Charles is becoming more and more fascinated, because Sarah had been an outcast, but when Charles enters the so-called picture, Sarah finds it convenient, and the flow of events is such that Sarah is given this way out, and Charles engages in this whole process voluntarily. I would always resist the femme fatale kind of tag that is sometimes given to Sarah. I would definitely not recommend anybody use that term. But she finds herself, he quote unquote loses himself, or perhaps he even finds himself. At the end, what he needs is release or fulfillment. Society conditions us to think that marriage is the path to fulfillment. Reconciliation union, a happy ending in marriage. That is the path of fulfillment. But quite often that is not. And that is why Fowles gives you so many possibilities. What you need to do is to choose the one that will suit you. I will end here. Thank you so much.